Okay, welcome to the new day. Yesterday, I woke up pretty early, around I think before 6, and I got up around the 6 and over 6, and I think it's 6:20. Then, but I didn't do stream because uh, I started a new routine because I have to upload my Chinese reading to my another channel, and my internet is not very good. Its speed is not good. Hope they will build up NBN to my house next week, and improve a little bit. Then I can do it. But because of the internet speed, I start a new routine. The new routine is really happy. I start the new routine. The new routine is that um, I will get up early every day, get up early, then I upload the Chinese reading to my Chinese channel. Um, in the same time, because when it upload things, the internet speed will slow down a little bit. But I don't think so. My daughter always say that it's so slow, but I don't think that because I upload it, I can watch video. So that's what my routine is. Upload the Chinese reading. At the same time, I do exercise. So this is the second day I do exercise. Yesterday I do some flow yoga, and today I do the Bali workout. Uh, I can't because it's a Bali workout. It's a little bit pretty simple than body. So I do it and sweaty a little bit. I really like it. That's so um, even after after the NBN, if it can improve my internet speed, I still keep on this routine, get up early and do the things. And yesterday, the upload really. Then after I upload upload the Chinese reading, it's already pretty late, and my daughter uh, got up and she had music lesson, so I can't do the stream, so just you know skip one day. They Now we can do it. It's because she haven't got up yet, so let's do it. He didn't know how wide a country, a reed and pre- precipitous must be crossed before the traveler through life comes to an acceptance of reality. It is an illusion that youth is happy, an illusion of those who have lost it. But the young the young know they are reached, they are wretched, for they are full of truthless ideas which have been instilled, instilled into them, and each time they come in contact with the real, they are bruised and wounded. It looks as if they were victims of a conspi- conspiracy for the book they read, ideal by the necessity of selection and the conversation of their elders. They look back upon the past through a rosy haze of forgetfulness, prepare them for an unreal life. They must discover for themselves that all they have read and all they have been told are lies, lies, lies. And each discovery is another nail driven into body on the cross of life. The strange thing is that each one who has gone through that bitter dis- dis- dissolution moment added to it in its turn, unconsciously, by the power by the power within them, which is stronger than himself. The companionship of Hayward was the worst possible thing for Philip. He was a man who saw nothing for himself, but only through a literary, uh, literary, but only through a literary atmosphere, and he was dangerous because he had deceived himself into sin- sincerity. Um, sin- sincerity. He honestly mistook his sen- sensibility for romantic emotion, his resiliency, his vacillation for temperament, and his idleness for philosophy calm, his mind vulgar in its effort at refinement, saw everything a little larger than life size, with the outline blurred in a golden mist of sentimental um, sentimentality, sentimentality, sentimentality. He lied and never knew that he lied, and when it was pointed out to him, said that lies were beautiful. He was an idealist. Okay. He didn't know how wide a country, arid, arid, 贫瘠的 arid, 贫瘠的 and precipitous, 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 arid, 干旱的 arid, 干旱的哦干旱的贫瘠的贫瘠的 pre precipitous, precipitous, 险峻的，险峻的，险峻的，险峻的。He didn't know how wide a country, arid, and precipitous, must be crossed before the traveler, through life come to an acceptance of reality. He didn't know how wide a country, arid, and precipitous must be crossed. Life come to an acceptance of reality. It is an illusion that youth is happy. It is an illusion of those who have lost. 幻想 illusion, yes, illusion. But the young know they are right,
wretched, wretched,
wretched, wretched, wretched, wretched, wretched, wretched, 不幸的。Let's see，然后再来把它全部掉。So they didn't know how wide a country and arid, arid and precipitous must be crossed before the traveler through life comes to an acceptance of reality. It is an illusion that youth is happy, an illusion of those who have lost it. But the young know they are wretched, for they are full of truthless ideas which have been instilled into them. Instill, which they have, they are full of the truthless idea which have been instilled into them, and each time they come in contact with the real, they are bruised and wounded, and each time they are full of they are full they they are full of truthless idea which have been instilled into them, and each time they come in contact with the real, they are bruised and wounded. It looks as if they were victims of a conspiracy. They are victims of a conspiracy. 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 Wisdom of a conspiracy. For the books they read, ideal by the necessity, ideal by the necessity,
necessity,
ideal by the necessity, ideal by the necessity of selection and the conversation of their elder, who look back upon the past through a rosy haze of forgetfulness, prepare them for an unreal life. For the books they read, ideal by the necessity selection, ideal by the necessity of selection, and the conversation of their elder, who look back upon the past through a rosy haze of forgetfulness, prepare them for an unreal life. They must discover for themselves that all they have read and all they have been told are lies, lies, lies. And each discovery is another nail driven into the body on the cross of life. The strange thing is that each one who has gone through that beta dis, disillusionment, 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 幻灭，直接就幻灭了。disillusionment,
disillusionment,
disillusion,
disillusionment,
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 disillusion,
disillusionment, disillusionment,
illusion, disillusionment, 幻灭。Later, disillusionment adds to it in his turn, unconsciously, by the power within him which is stronger than himself. That was the worst possible thing for Philip. He was a man of saw nothing for only through a literary atmosphere, and he was dangerous because he had deceived himself into sincerity. 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 Sincerity.
sincerity,
Sincerity. Deceived himself into sincerity. 真挚。He deceived himself sincerity. He honestly mistook his mistook. He honestly mistook 误解 his sensuality.
sensuality, sensuality,
Sensuality.
sensuality,
Sensuality. He honestly mistook his sensuality for romantic emotion. His vacillation, his vacillation his vacillation,
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 vacillation. His vacillation his vacillation, vacillation, 波动 vacillation for the artistic temperament, temperament. 摇摆 his vacillation for the artistic temperament and his idleness for philosophic and his idleness for philosophic calm and his idleness for philosophic he honestly mistook his sensuality for romantic emotion, his vacillation for the artistic temperament, and his idleness for philosophy calm. Idleness for philosophy calm，这个就麻烦。His man augur in its effort at refinement, saw everything his vulgar in its effort at refinement. In its effort at refinement. So higher than life size, with the outline blurred in a golden mist of sentimentality. 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 不出伤害。Sentimentality.
Sentimentality.
Sentimentality. In a golden mist of sentimentality, he lied and he never knew that he lied. And when it was pointed out to him, said that lies were beautiful, he was an idealist. Philip was restless and dissatisfied. Hayward's poetic allusions troubled his imagination, and his soul yearned for romance. At least that was how he put it to himself. And it happened that an incident was taking place in Florence house, which increased Philip's preoccupation with the matter of sex. I need to get something to wear. You know, now it's spring, but Melbourne weather, yesterday I think it's 26 degree, and now let's see the degree. Now the degree 14. So a little bit when I walked out, I feel so warm, and I took off my clothes, and now it's cold. Okay, let's restart. Increased Philip's preoccupation with the matter of sex. 2 or 3 times on his walk among the hills, he had met Fräulein Cassidy, wandering by herself. He had passed her with a bow, and a few yards further on had seen. He thought nothing of it, but one evening on his way home, when night had already fallen, he passed 2 people walking very close together. Hearing his step foot, they separated quickly, and though he could not see well in the darkness, he was almost certain they were Kathleen and her young. Their rapid movement apart suggests that they had been walking arm in arm. That's so interesting. At age, walking arm in arm is not a moral thing. Philip was puzzled and surprised. He had never paid much attention to Fraulein Cassidy. Cassidy. He was a plain. He was a plain. He was a plain girl with a square face and blunt feature and blunt features. She could not have been more than 16. Oh, he could not have been more than 16, since he still wore her long fair hair in a plait. In a plate? What in a plate? 往里边吗？哦，变成辫子的。哦，we already plait. Okay, this is plait. So we already read it in Princess Little Princess. Plait. Wear her long fair hair in a plait. Wear her long fair hair in a plait. That evening at supper, he looked at her curiously, and though of late he had talked little at meal, she addressed him. That evening at supper, he looked at her curiously, and though of late he had talked little at meal, he addressed him. Where did you go for your walk today? Her carry. Oh, her 先生的意思大概是 her carry. She asked. Oh, I walked up towards the Kingston. I didn't go out. She volunteered. I had a headache. The Chinaman, who sat next to her, turned around. I'm sorry. I hope it's better now. Fraulein Cassidy was evidently uneasy, for she spoke again to Philip. Did you meet many people on the way? Philip could not help reddening when he told a downright lie. No, I don't think I saw a living soul. She fancied that a look of relief passed across her eyes. Soon, however, there could be no doubt that there was something between the pair. The Frau Professor's house saw them lurking in dark places. Lurking, 闲逛。Look, 潜伏。Saw them lurking in dark places. The elderly lady who sat at the head of the table began to discuss what was now a scandal. The professor was angry and harassed. She had done her best to see nothing. The professor was angry and harassed. Harassed 折磨的疲惫的 harassed疲惫 yeah, was angry and harassed. He had done her best to see nothing. The winter was at hand, and the winter was at hand, and it was not as easy a matter than and it was not as easy a matter than as in the summer to keep her house full. Her son was a good customer. He had 2 rooms on the ground floor, and he drank a bottle of Mosler at each meal. The prom professor charged him 3 marks a bottle and made a good profit. None of her other guests drank wine, and some of them didn't even drink beer. Neither did she wish to lose Fräulein Käslin, whose parents were in business in South America and paid well for the Frau Professor's motherly care. And she knew that if she wrote to the girl's uncle, who lived in Berlin, he would immediately take her away. The Frau Professor contented himself. The prophet contented herself with giving them both severe look at table, and though he dared not be rude to the Chinaman, got a certain satisfaction out of incivility got a certain satisfaction out of incivility to Cassidy, but the 3 elderly ladies were not content. 2 were widows, and one, a Dutch woman, was a spinster of masculine appearance. I need another pair of socks. 1 pair of socks. I use the big. They paid the smallest possible sum for their pension and gave a good deal of trouble. Yes. 2 were widows, and one, a Dutch woman, was a spinster of masculine appearance. Let's see, spinster. 未婚的。Oh, yes, spinster. 婚的。We already learned.
Spinster.
Spinster. Already learned it. Spinster of masculine appearance. Masculine. Oh yeah, we learned it.
Masculine.
男性化的样子。Maybe she's a lesbian. Yeah, masculine. We already learned it. Masculine appearance. 男性化的。Masculine appearance. They paid the smallest possible sum of their pension and gave a great deal of trouble. But they were permanent They were permanent and therefore they had to be put up with. They went to the professor and said that something might be done. It was disgraceful. This was disgraceful, and the house was ceasing to be respectable. Okay. The the floor professor tried obs, obstinacy, angry. Let's see how to read it. Obstinacy. Oh, obstinacy, obstinacy. It is
Obstinacy.
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 Good. Obstinacy. Professor tried obstinacy. Good. Obstinacy, anger, tears, but the three old lady routed her. Let's see. What's this mean? Root. Routed her.
Route.
Routed her.
Route.
Route. But the three old ladies routed her, and with a sudden assumption of vicious indignation, she said that she would put a stop to the whole thing. After luncheon, she took Kathleen into her bedroom and began to talk very seriously to her. But to her amazement, the girl adopted a brazen attitude. She proposed to go about as she liked, and if she chose to walk with the Chinaman, she could not see it was anybody's business but her own. Yes, the floor professor threatened to write her uncle. A brazen attitude. He proposed to go out as she liked, and if she chose to walk with the Chinaman, she could not see it was anybody's business but her own. The professor threatened to write her uncle. The uncle Heinrich will put me in a family in Berlin for the winter, and that will be much nicer for me. And her son will come to Berlin too. The floor professor began to cry. The tears rolled down her coarse, red fat cheeks, and Kathleen laughed at her. coarse maybe 肥胖吧，粗糙的粗意肥胖。coarse. Tears rolled down her coarse, red, fat cheeks, and Kathleen laughed at her. That will mean 3 rooms empty all through the winter, she sighed. Then the professor tried another plan. She appealed to Fräulein Kathleen's better nature. She was kind, sensible she treated her no longer as a child, but as a grown woman. She said that it wouldn't be so dreadful, but a Chinaman with his yellow skin and a flat nose and his little pig's ears. That's what made it so horrible. It filled one with disgust. Then the Frau Professor tried another plan. She appealed to Catherine's better nature. She was kind, sensible, tolerant. She treated her no longer as a child, but a grown woman. She said that it wouldn't be so dreadful, but a Chinaman with his yellow skin and flat nose and his little pig's eyes. Oh, little pig's eyes. Really? That's what made it so horrible. It filled one with disgust to think of. Beta, said Kathleen with a rapid intake of breath. I won't listen to anything. I won't listen to anything against him. But it's not serious. But but it's not serious, gasped Frau Erling. I love him. I love him. I love him. I don't know what that's. The professor stared at her with horrified surprise. She had thought it was no more than naughtiness on the child's part, and innocent folly. But the passion in her voice revealed everything. Kathleen looked at her for a moment with flaming eyes, and then with a shrug of her shoulder went out of the room. Frau Erling kept the detail of the interview to herself. And a day or two later alert the arrangement of the table. She asked Ersan. She asked her son if he wouldn't come and sit at her end, and with her unfailing politeness accepted with um, alacrity, 高兴 alacrity 乐意的 With alacrity, Kathleen took the change indifferently, but as if the discovery that the relation between them were known to the whole household made them more shameless. They made no secret now of their walks together, and every afternoon quite openly set out to wander about the hills. It was plain that they didn't care what was said of them. At last, even the placidity 平静 The placidity of Professor Erling was moved, and he insisted that his wife should speak to the Chinaman. She took him aside in his turn and expostulated. Expostulated.告诫 expostulated
Expostulate.
Expostulate. She took him aside in his turn and expostulated. He was ruining the girl's reputation. He was doing harm to the horse. He must see how wrong and weak his conduct was. But he was met with smiling denials. But she was met with smiling denials. Her son didn't know what he was talking about. He was not paying any attention to Fräulein Kathleen. He never walked with her. Really, he never walked with her. It was all untrue, every word of it. Arch, her son, how can you say such things? You've been seen again and again. No, you are mistaken. It's untrue. He looked at her with an unceasing smile, which showed his even, little white teeth. He was quite calm. He denied everything. He denied with blunt, infront, blunt effrontery. At last, the Frau Professor lost his temper and said the girl had confessed she loved him. He was not moved. He continued to smile. Nonsense. It's all untrue. Bland. Bland.
Effrontery.
Infrontary.
Effrontery. Effrontery. Effrontery.
What can you do when you meet that kind of people? Oh, yeah. Blunt. He denied with blunt in a effrontery. At last, the Frau Professor lost her temper and said the girl had confessed she loved him. He was not moved. He continued to smile. Nonsense. It's all untrue. She could get nothing out of him. He could get nothing out of him. The weather grew very bad. There was snow and frost, and then a storm with a long succession of chilly days. What's that? Oh, so,
Thaw.
so, what? And then a thaw with a long succession of chilly days. Slice of Child's Day, on which walking was a poor amusement. One evening, when Philip had just finished his German lesson with the Herr Professor, her professor, and was standing for a moment in the drawing room talking to Frau Erling. Anna came quickly in. "Mamma, where is Kathleen?" she said. I suppose she's in her room. There's no light in it." The Frau Professor gave an exclamation. The Frau Professor gave an exclamation, and she looked at her daughter in dismay. The thought which was in Anna's head had flashed across hers. Exclamation.
exclamation,
Exclamation.
exclamation,
惊叫 give an exclamation.
exclamation,
Let's see. Give an exclamation. And she looked at her daughter in dismay. In dismay, the thought which was in Anna's head had flashed across her. "Right, ring for Emil," she said hoarsely. "Ring for Emil," she said hoarsely. This was the stupid lord who waited at table and did most of the homework. It was the stupid lord who waited at table and did most of the housework. He came in. "Emil, go down to her son's room and enter without knocking. If anyone is there, say you came in to see about the stove." No sign of astonishment appeared on Irma's phlegmatic face. Let's see. Phlegmatic.
phlegmatic,
Dramatic.
phlegmatic,
Phlegmatic. 冷静的 I think it's 迟钝的 Phlegmatic face. He went slowly downstairs. The Frau Professor and Anna left the door open and listened. Presently they heard Emil come up again, and they called him. "Was anyone there?" asked the Frau Professor. "Yes, her son was there." Was he alone?" The beginning of a cunning smile narrowed his mouth. "No, Fräulein Kathleen was there." "Oh, it's disgraceful!" cried the Frau Professor. Now he smiled boldly. "Frau Kathleen is there. Fräulein Kathleen is there every evening. She spends hours at a time there." Frau Professor began to wring her hands. "Oh, how abominable! Oh, how abominable! But why didn't you tell me? It was no business of mine, he answered, slowly shrugging his shoulders. I suppose they paid you well. Go away, go. He lurched clumsily to the door. They must go away, Mom, said Anna. And who's going to pay the rent? And the taxes are falling due. It's all very well for you to say they must go away. If they go away, I can't pay the bills. She turned to Philip. With tears streaming down her face. Arch, Carrie, you will not say what you have heard. You will not say what you have heard. If Fraulein Foster, this was the Dutch spinster, if Fraulein Foster knew, she would leave at once, and if they all go, we must close the house. I can't afford to keep it. Of course, I won't say anything. If she stays, I will not speak to her, said Anna. That evening at supper, Fraulein Kathleen, redder than usual, with a look of obstinacy on her face, took her place punctually, but her son didn't, and for a while Philip thought he was going to shirk the ordeal. At last he came, very, very smiling, his little eyes dancing with the apologies he made for his late arrival. He insisted, as usual, on pouring out the Frau Professor a glass of his Mosler, and he offered a glass to Fraulein Foster. The room was very hot, for the stove had been alight all day. Let's see what shirk is. Shirk, 逃避.
shirk,
Ordeal.
ordeal,
哦，折磨，严峻的考验。At last, he came, very smiling, his little eyes dancing with the apologies he made for his late arrival. He insisted, as usual, on pouring out the Frau Professor a glass of his Mosler, and he offered a glass for Fraulein Foster. The room was very hot, for the stove had been alight all day, and the windows were seldom opened. Emil blundered about, but succeeded somehow in serving but succeeded somehow in serving everyone quickly and with order. The three old ladies sat in silence, visibly disapproval. The professor had scarcely recovered from her tears. Her husband was silent and oppressed. Conversation languished. Conversation languished. It seemed to Philip that there was something dreadful in that gathering which he had sat with so often. They looked different under the light of the two hanging lamps from what they had ever looked before. He was vaguely uneasy. Once he caught Catherine's eye, and he thought she looked at him with hatred and contempt. The room was stifling. The room was stifling. It was as though the beastly passion of that pair troubled them all. There was a there was a feeling of oriental depravity. There was a feeling of oriental depravity, a faint, a faint savor of joysticks, a mystery of hidden vices, seemed to make their breath heavy. Philip could feel the beating of the arteries in arteries in his forehead. Look, before he was vaguely uneasy. Conversation languished, 消失没有了吧？languish languished 问不了，受折磨，受折磨的，衰弱变得衰弱的。Conversation languished. Hungry? You hungry?
Languished.
Languish. Conversation languished. It seemed to Philip that there was something dreadful in that gathering which he had sat with so often. They looked different under the light of two hanging lamps from what they had ever looked before. He was vaguely uneasy. Once he caught Catherine's eye, and he thought she looked at him with hatred and contempt. The room was stifling.
Stifle.
Stifling. The room was stifling. It was as though the beastly passion of that pair troubled them all, and there was a feeling of oriental depravity. Depravity, 堕落。
Depravity.
Depravity, we already learned it. 堕落，罪行。堕落，恶行。A faint savor faint, fever, fever, fever,
savor,
fever, fever,
savor,
fever. Of joystick. What's joystick? Joystick. Joystick 香啊。哦 joystick. A mystery of hidden voices seemed to make their breath heavy. Philip could feel the beating of the arteries. I think 那个artery 动脉 artery 动脉 artery. The beating of the arteries in his forehead. He could not understand what strange emotion distracted him. He seemed to feel something infinitely attractive, and yet he was repelled and horrified. Repelled and yet he was repelled and horrified. For several days things went on. The air was sickly with the unnatural passion which all felt about them, and the nerves of the little household seemed except exasperated. 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 Only her song remains unaffected. He was now no less smiling, affable, not a good guy. He was no less smiling, affable, and polite than he had been before. One could not tell whether his manner was a triumph of civilization or an expression of contempt on the part of the Oriental for the vanquished West. No one could tell whether his manner was a triumph of civilization or an expression of contempt on the part of the Oriental for the vanquished West. Kathleen was flaunting and cynical. At last, even the floor provision no longer. Flaunting. Let's see what's flaunting and cynical. 炫耀 cynical cynical 愤世嫉俗的 棘鼠，正是棘鼠啊，正是的炫耀。Was flunking and even the professor could bear the position no longer. Suddenly panic seized her. For Professor Erling, with brutal frankness, had suggested the possible consequence of an intrigue manifest to everyone. Intrigue. Intrigue. Which was now manifest to everyone, and she saw her good name. Manifest to everyone, and she saw her good name in Hedberg and the repute of her house, which could not possibly be hidden. For some reason, blinded perhaps by her interests, this possibility had never occurred to her. And now her wits, muddled by a terrible fear, he could hardly be prevented from turning the girl out of the house at once. It was due to Anna's good sense. It was due to Anna's good sense that a cautious letter was written to the uncle in Berlin suggesting that Kathleen should be taken away. Having made up her mind to lose the two lodgers, the Frau Professor could not resist the satisfaction of giving rein to ill temper. Gave rein to the ill temper he had curbed so long. He was free now to say anything she liked to Kathleen. I have written to your uncle, Kathleen, to take you away. I can't have you in my house any longer. Her little round eyes sparkled when she noticed the sudden whiteness of her little round eyes sparkled when she noticed the sudden whiteness of the girl's face. You are shameless, she went on. She called her full names. She called her full names. Full name. She called her full names. What did you say to my uncle? What did you to my uncle, Henry? Frau Professor, the girl asked, suddenly falling from her attitude of flaunting independence. Oh, he will tell you himself. I expected to get a letter from a, a letter from him tomorrow. Next day, in order to take the humiliation more public at supper, she called down the table. She called down the table to Kathleen. I have had a letter from your uncle, Kathleen. You are to pick your things tonight, and we'll put you in the train tomorrow morning. Himself in Berlin at the central. Well, where? Very good, Frau Professor. Her smelled in the Frau Professor's eyes, and notwithstanding her protests, insisted on and notwithstanding her protests, insisted on pouring out a glass of wine for her. The Frau supper with a good appetite, but he had triumphed unwisely. Just before he called the servant. Emil, if Fräulein Kathleen's box is ready, you'd better take it downstairs tonight. The porter will fetch it before breakfast. The servant went away and in a moment came back. Fräulein Kathleen is not in her room, and her bag has gone. With a cry, the Frau Professor hurried along. The box was on the floor, strapped and locked. But there was no bags, and neither hat nor cloak. The dressing table was empty. Breathing heavily, the Frau Professor ran downstairs to the Chinaman's room, moved so quickly for 20 years, and Emil called out after her to beware she didn't fall. She didn't trouble to knock, but burst in. The room was empty. The luggage had gone, and the door into the garden still open, show how it had been got away. In an envelope on the table were a note for the money due on the man's board and an approximate sum for extras. Groans suddenly overcome by her haste. The Frau Professor sank obviously onto the sofa. There could be no doubt the pair had gone off together. Emily remains stolid and unmoved. Hayward, after saying for a month that he was going south next day and delaying from week to week, out of inability to make up his mind to the bother of packing and the tedium of a journey. Tedium. Wait. Yes, tedium. and the tedium of a journey driven off just before Christmas by the preparation for the festival. He could not support the of a merrymaking. It gave him goose flesh to think of the season, goose flesh to think of the season's aggressive cheerfulness, and the obvious. He determined to travel on Christmas Eve. Goose flesh. We already oh, yeah, flesh. Let's see what's goose flesh. 鸡皮疙瘩. It gave him goose flesh to think of the season's aggressive cheerfulness, and in his desire to avoid the obvious, he determined to travel on Christmas Eve. Philip was not sorry to see him off, for he was a downright person, and it irritated him that anybody should not know his own mind. Though much under Hewitt's influence, he would not grant that indecision pointed to a charming sensitiveness, and he resented the shadow of a sneer with which Hewitt looked upon his streetways. Okay, that's all for today.